from my woods today. It's actually nice enough out that I can go out. I had this bench, was a birthday gift from my husband last fall, and I was all excited to use it. And then, after I got it put out here, it became winter. So I haven't really used it very much, but it's in one of my favorite areas on my property. It's kind of, I feel like it's the heart of the property. It's sort of in the middle of everything. There's this open area, a trail that goes by, and in front of me, I can see one of our ponds. So it's just a really nice spot. And I thought it'd be fun to come to you from this spot today. So this week's topic we've talked about before, but I feel like I've gained some clarity on a few things around this week's topic. So I wanted to bring it up again this week. All right. So the topic of this week is something I call the window of trainability. So if you've read my book that I wrote with Linda, I mention it in there, but essentially the window of trainability is the area in the nervous system where the mammal, essentially, it doesn't matter, horses, humans, dogs, cats, the mammal is ready for new information, right? The current MO isn't working and they're ready to find a new way of doing something. Okay. So in order for us to appreciate the window of trainability, there's two other, states for the nervous system to be in that we need to understand and how they, work with each other. There's the comfort zone, right? The comfort zone is when we're fully in the parasympathetic, right? Rest and digest. Nothing's agitated. There are no stress hormones in the body. Probably have a heavy dose of endorphins, so you might feel a little sleepy or disconnected, things like that. So not ready, right? The comfort zone is not a place where learning happens. It might be a place where learning gets reinforced, but it's not where learning gets initiated. All right. If we are in our comfort zone, whether our horses or as humans, you're not growing, you're coasting. Okay. And there's a time and a place for that. That is needed. Coasting is important. Don't villainize the comfort zone. Okay. It's a good place to be. But if we stay there, we don't gain new skills. We don't grow. And actually your skill set and resilience will shrink. Now, in humans, we have the capacity to stay there regardless, because we don't have to get outside of our comfort zone anymore to survive, right? We don't have to get out of our comfort zone to go find food or water or shelter or seek mates, right? You can do all of that from inside your home. And I know lots of humans that, avoid exiting their comfort zone. And every time I see them, week after week, month after month, year after year, what their resilience level, their ability to try new things and explore the world and live is smaller and smaller. So we need to be able to get outside of our comfort zone. Horses are more adapt to that because they don't have a possibility to not be right. We set them up pretty good, right? Domestic horses do have a lot less resilience, of course, than feral horses would, right? And I've used the term feral on purpose, right? Everybody, there's no such thing as wild horses in very many places in the world anymore. All right. The Przewalski horse in Russia is still genetically a wild horse. But the Mustangs here, and I love them to bits, don't get me wrong, they're not wild, they're feral. Okay. But what that says is that they're very resilient, which means they're very good at exploring their world outside of their comfort zone. They know how to do that very efficiently. So it's oftentimes why if you get a Mustang from the BLM, especially if you get them young, they're actually usually pretty good to train. They're often not super tough to train because they're super resilient. All right. All that being said, the first time I ever had an opportunity to ride in a ambulance was because I made a bad choice with a Mustang. So don't make a rule out of that. Okay. So we need to know how to get them out of the comfort zone into the window of trainability, right? So in order to do that, we have to present them with a situation that's novel. We need to present a moderate amount of stress in a situation where the horse feels like they have agency and autonomy, especially over their own bodies, right? So they need to feel like they have a say, and that you're not going to try to put them in a situation that they haven't had a chance to sort of mull over. Okay. So the goal isn't to avoid stress. The goal is to present moderate amounts of stress in a way that builds resilience. That way, we can continue to experience novel situations and not have it be a big deal, right? So how wide their window is determined by how resilient they are, and the width of their window will be determined by whether or not they've been exposed to stress in a way that develops resilience. A lot of stress that horses get exposed to pops them beyond the window of trainability into defense mode, right? So once the nervous system gets into defensiveness, all kinds of stress hormones flood the nervous system. Do you know that as human beings, we literally lose 10 IQ points when we get into the sympathetic nervous system? No joke. I mean, you literally become stupid when you get defensive, right? So the goal would be to learn how to experience stress without getting defensive, right? Without popping so far out that you trigger stress hormones, right? Cortisol and adrenaline and all of those things cause us to reroute resources from the thinking brain into, the parts of the body that are needed for survival, fight and flight. Okay. So the resources aren't available to think our way through something because they're being used for other things, right? So with horses, right, it's going to happen. You're going to accidentally, on a somewhat regular basis, probably pop them into defense mode. Whoops a daisy. I did not mean to do that. That was my fault. My bad. Right. So when that happens, the goal has to be to get them back to their comfort zone. You have to get back to reset in rest and digest, and then try to get back into the window of trainability. Not try to get them back into the window of trainability, because you're more likely to just keep popping them back into defensive mode and develop coping mechanisms rather than resilience. All right. Coping mechanisms include things like learned helplessness, which to me means like hyper obedience. Lots and lots of horses learn that, right? That I'm not allowed to say, I have no agency here. I don't have any say over what's happening to me. So I'm just going to put my head down essentially and try to get through this the best I can with get in as little trouble as possible. So stuff can get done when a horse is in defense mode. They can be pumped full of cortisol and you can get high performance out of them depending on their horsenality and their spirit level and, things like that. Not all horses are going to tolerate that, but you walk into any high performance barn and you're likely to find at least one individual that's how they're surviving their experience there, right? I don't mean to villainize performance barns, but that is how a lot of that stuff gets done. And then the horses who, mentally and emotionally won't put up with that, they get kicked out, right? They get sent to the sale barn. That's how it works. They have brood mares that just crank out the babies until they get the ones that, can put up with the training and all the rest. And usually the left brainers, honestly, usually the pushy horses, right, in Linda terms, don't make the cut. It has to be a tense horse, a right brain horse, in order for them to, be able to cope with that scenario. Okay. So as happy horse trainers, right, trainers who want our horses to be happy about being trained, we also need to, understand that staying happy doesn't mean not feeling stressed. In order for our happy horses to be happy, they have to be resilient, right? If we want to do anything with them, right? If you're just going to let them be pasture ornaments and all you're going to do is sort of provide for their basic care and needs, probably don't need to have a lot of resilience, right? I have one. It's my mom's horse. I feel guilty on about a monthly basis. Like, sorry, kid, nothing left for you. You're not my horse. And that's her life. I mean, she's not abused, but she's also not resilient. If anything changes in her routine, something comes into her life that she hasn't had exposure to before, she cannot handle it, right? She gets wildly stressed out. I found a kid once that I thought might be a good match for her, that she might, go home with. A new human was straight away completely stressed out. It was a kid, like a 15, 16-year-old kid. I'm not going to send a 25-year-old horse off to be stressed out for the last 5-10 years of her life. So she's here till she's done with this earth. But that, she's a good example of a horse that hasn't had moderate exposure to stress where she felt she had a sense of agency. Since she's lived with me, which has been 6 years, she's had literally almost zero exposure to stress, right? There's food, there's shelter, the herd is small, the pasture is big. There's not a lot in her life to cause her to be resilient. So, she is who she is because of her life experiences, right? Where I have the opposite of that as well. Gina, my warm blood, is getting better. I had the greatest trot on her today. It was amazing. Jan and Leanne are here. And so having other horses in the arena really helps her. And I've probably literally only trotted her maybe like 10 strides in a row before my heart was just like, I gotta stop. Where today, I think it was like a 20-meter circle, maybe 15-meter circle. And I did like 2.5 laps. It was awesome. So good. So her window's getting wider, but her early life, from 0 to 7-ish, had very low exposure to stress. She was a brood mare. She lived where she was born. She lived with her mother, so not a lot of exposure to stress. So she didn't develop any resilience, not very much resilience, right? Then she went from, having very little exposure to novelty into a performance barn. She got sold from Ohio and shipped to Massachusetts. She was a brood mare in Ohio, and now she's in a jumping barn in Massachusetts. And she was already like 7 or 8 by the time that happened. So a lot of years of not being taught to be resilient. That's a lot of rehearsal of I don't do novel things. And they tried to, ride her like an 8-year-old horse, and it didn't work out very good. She regularly apparently unloaded riders out of defensiveness, right? She'd get so overwhelmed by the novelty that they were exposing her to that she would panic, right? And the way that she would panic would be to unload the riders. She didn't have any other choice. I know for sure she had a bit in her mouth because she has grooves in her lips, like in the corner of her lips, either from being pulled on so hard or from being in a bitting rig of some kind. So she would have felt trapped by the bit. So I can't run away, which I think would be her normal choice, would be to bolt. I do believe she'd rather bolt than buck. But if she's blocked, then I don't have any other choice, right? I'm panicking. Get off. And she's 17 two hands worth of fancy bred jumping horse, right? She didn't have too much trouble unloading riders. So it's terrifying. I don't like to jump, and I hate when horses buck. I don't know what I'm doing. So she got wildly stressed out. She got repeated exposure to extreme amounts of stress for her, and she didn't feel like she had a say. So instead of developing resilience, she developed a coping strategy, and her coping strategy is unload the rider and run back to the barn, right? So that's not good. That's not helping. That's that's not helpful. So my plan has been, to be able to get her out of her comfort zone, have a good strategy for asking her to leave her comfort zone and enter the window of trainability. And then from there, I have to be able to stay sensitive to her and let her tell me energetically with her body language in our exchange of spirituals, right? I need to be able to hear her say, I am approaching my limit, and be able to go, that's all right. Let's go back to the comfort zone. All right. When I hear her say, and now here's what a fun little transition that's happening. I'm approaching my limit before she is. She's saying I'm fine. And I'm going, that's enough for me. And my heart rate just spiked at 166. I checked my Apple Watch yesterday, and it went from 65 to 166. So that's a pretty big, I'm out of my comfort zone a long ways, probably approaching defensiveness. So if I want to build resilience for myself, it works the same for me too. I have to know what my limits are and be able to honor them as well. Right. So she's getting more resilient. It's slow going. I think a lot of that has to do with her age, right? She'll be 14 this year. So she had 7 years of rehearsing that I'm not a resilient animal. I like my comfort zone. I make babies. That's all life is. There's nothing outside of that world. And then got, so overexposed that her nervous system just got a little bit bogged down. It's called an allostatic load, right? It's essentially PTSD, right? It's an unresolved trauma that like stacks, right? So, every time I play with her, I'm trying to like peel off and allow those cycles to resolve. Any stress needs a cycle. It goes through a predictable sequence in the nervous system, electrically and biochemically, right? It starts in one place and builds to another and to another until it gets resolved. In order for it to get resolved, it can't get interrupted. It can't get like suppressed. So the horse needs to feel like they have agency, and that's only a moderate amount of stress, and the biochemicals need to finish, right? So movement is needed. Okay. So I'm going to guess that a lot of times when Gina bucked a rider off, she would get back to the barn still pumping cortisol and adrenaline, and the people who were there didn't know what to do, so they'd unsaddle her and put her away. So she'd be put in a stall with a limbic system that's still flooded with stress hormones. And stress hormones, you don't flush them, you don't like pee them out, things like that. There's no pump in the limbic system. You have to burn them off. And so you need to move. They need, if she got turned out in a pasture, I think that probably would have been less allostatic load building than being put in a stall. But I know she was stalled, so that probably contributed to some of the the PTSD. Okay, so here, I want to relate that to how we use pressure, and then I'll open it up to you guys. Okay, so if my horse is sleepy because they're in their comfort zone, and I'd like to have a conversation with them, they need to be responsive. They're not responsive when they're in their comfort zone. All right, they're sleepy. Endorphins make them dull, like a dope head. Okay, we need to wake them up. We need a cup of coffee. Okay, so in order to do that, we're probably going to have to use a little bit of pressure. So probably just a little bit of pressure to get them out of the comfort zone into the window of trainability, right? Then once they're in the window of trainability, we use pressure for clarity, right? We use pressure to point them towards the right answer, to point them towards harmony. So there's two things that we need to understand about the window of trainability. There's the teaching stage, then there's the reinforcing stage. When I'm in the teaching stage, I'm using pressure and release, right? I'm going to start breathing hard. Sorry. When they're in the transitioning into, let's see up now. Of course, I should have just stayed hunkered down. When I'm transitioning into from teaching into reinforcing, then I want for my horse to enjoy doing the thing, right? Harmony happens in motion. It doesn't happen at the halt. I want it to feel good while we're riding, while my horse is in motion. So instead of pressure and release, you'll transition to what I call staying in the boat. All right. So the boat is either my aids, right? My seat, the bit. It's fine now. I better keep going back. Sorry, it's a lot in my brain right now. The boundaries of the boat when I'm riding are my seat, the bit, my legs, and the reins. All right. Stay inside there and we'll feel good. I'll have a joyful feeling. You'll like it. It'll be fun, right? If any part of your body, going uphill, if any part of your body starts to leak out of the boat, I'm going to bite it. All right. I'm going to make it uncomfortable. I'm I'm not going to just use enough pressure to put you back in the boat. I'm going to use enough pressure that you don't want to leak out of the boat, right? So we can use, especially the longer the relationship has been with our horses, we can use just a little bit of pressure, right, to move them. Like if like you move a piece of furniture across the floor, if there's not carpet, it doesn't take too much, but that's not harmony, that's pressure, right? So if I just use a little bit of pressure to put her back in the boat, she's still looking for release in a halt, right? That's where you can only get a step or two or three, but they're always going, is that enough? Is that enough? How about now? Is that enough? Right? Because they're looking for it to be over. That's what you teach them to do when you only use pressure and release. But if you can transition to stay in the boat, the goal will be to stay in the boat. And sometimes the boat is moving, right? So then you can move the boat as much as you want, but they won't put effort into staying in the boat if you don't bother them when they leave the boat, right? If you just, use enough pressure to put them back, you move their feet, but you don't change their mind about it, okay? Okay. It's ridiculous. I already did my walk today. Now, the amount of pressure that you're going to need to help them when they get popped into defense mode depends on the horse, right? So you need to match them. Whatever amount of energy they're putting into defending themselves, that's the energy it will take to bring them back. So if you have a horse who gets big and dramatic and pushy, right, you have to match that. Or if you have a horse who hides inside themselves and tries to go away somewhere, you have to match that too. If you don't match it, it usually makes it worse, right? So if you're too big for the stoppers or not big enough for the movers, if you don't push the pushers, or if you allow tension to keep perpetuating in the tense horses, it'll just escalate. It'll get worse and worse and worse. You have to match them to be able to bring them back into the comfort zone. And sometimes that means getting big and sometimes it doesn't, okay? It depends on the horse and what they're doing to defend themselves. I'm almost back to the house. And it totally stopped raining. Now I want to be outside. Okay, so let me just review that with you. If they're inside their comfort zone, you probably just need a little tap that says, hey, wake up, right? Something that's just really mildly annoying. Like, hey, we're going to do something. Sometimes all I'll do, if I'm on the ground especially, so just like stick my finger in their ear or in their mouth, just something that's annoying that says, hey, I'm gonna do something now. Like, can you wake up? If they're inside the window of trainability, pressure is used for clarity. And the goal is not to just move their feet, right? It's to teach them to stay in the boat. There's going to be some pressure and release needed in that process, but it's not as much as you think. Usually it's 1 or 2 sessions, and sometimes you can transition from pressure and release into stay in the boat in the same session, right? It can happen that quick. So pressure is used for clarity in the window of trainability. And then when we use the best use of pressure when they're in defense mode is you have to match them, right? Move the mover, stop the stopper, push the pusher, and relax the tensor. And what the biggest mistake I see happening is not using pressure appropriately in the window of trainability, right? I'm not trying to just get feet or the body to do something. I want the mind to do it. In order for that to happen, you have to bother them, right? I've more than once, I think I've set back a video where I said, okay, let's review that, shall we? And I stop the video and I rewind it and I go again and say, and in slow-mo, have you watch, see where you offered pressure there? Your horse did not perceive it as pressure. That was a pet, right? It was a love tap, right? It wasn't annoying enough to change their mind. It might have been enough pressure to move their feet, but it won't change their mind unless it is bothersome. Okay, so our goal is not to keep them happy. Our goal is to teach them to be resilient and to seek harmony in the boat, right? To stay in the boat. If they can stay in the boat, then they want to keep doing it. They don't keep hunting the stop. So it becomes autotelic, right? The exercise is satisfying in itself. We're not trying to get to an end goal. The end goal is the conversation, right? The journey is the goal, not the destination.